How some children played at slaughtering. No, really. That's the title. This is a Grimm Brothers fairy tale so violent and disturbing that they themselves removed it from later editions because it was unsuitable for children. The story starts innocently enough, with two boys watching their father slaughtering a pig. So later, they decide to play butcher. The older brother takes the knife and slits his younger brother's throat. You know, like a butcher. Their mother hears her child scream. She's busy bathing the baby, but she abandons it and runs to see what happened. When she sees what her eldest child did, she takes the knife out of her younger son's throat, and in her rage stabs her older son in the heart. She then returns to the baby, only to discover that it had drowned in the tub. Overwhelmed by grief, the mother hangs herself. After a long day of work in the field, the father comes home. He discovers that his whole family is dead, and soon also dies from sadness. That's it. That's the story. I'm not really sure what kind of moral this story is trying to teach, and neither were the Grimms. Who would have thought it to be possible? A fairy tale too grim for the Grimms. Donkeyskin. Okay, I know that was a pretty heavy start. So, let's slow it down a bit. The next one is just about a king who, oh Christ, who wants to marry his own daughter. Really, Perrault? Donkeyskin is a French fairy tale, most famously told by Charles Perrault. It begins with a widowed king who swears he'll only remarry someone as beautiful as his late wife. Unfortunately, the only woman who qualifies is his own daughter, and a king needs a queen, so, yeah, he presses on. And his daughter is surprisingly horrified. She begs for impossible wedding gifts before she will give her consent, hoping he will stop his endeavor, but the king is determined and disturbingly efficient. He delivers gowns the color of the sky, the moon, and the sun. Then she demands the skin of her father's magical donkey, which droppings are made of pure gold, the very source of the king's wealth. But it's not a problem. He has it slaughtered and deliver the skin to her. Running out of options, the princess flees, wearing the donkey's hide as a disguise. She flees to a village where she works as a scullery maid, filthy and mocked. The locals call her Donkeyskin. But on holidays, she secretly wears the beautiful dresses her father gave her. One day, a perverted prince spies on her through the keyhole and becomes instantly obsessed. But everyone tells him that Donkeyskin is hideous, so it can't be her. So naturally, he becomes deathly ill with grief. He declares that only a cake baked by Donkeyskin can save him. So she bakes it, and accidentally drops her ring into the batter. He finds it, and declares that he will only marry the woman who the ring fits. And so, a Cinderella-style search begins. But none of the suitors can wear it. Finally, Donkeyskin is summoned, the ring fits, and she removes the disguise, revealing her royal identity. Then, a fairy conveniently appears and explains everything to the prince's parents. And the princess father, now conveniently remarried, blesses the match. Really, Perrault? He got invited to the wedding? Okay, sure. Why the hell not? And they all lived happily ever after. The end. The Juniper Tree. There are dark fairy tales. And then there's the Juniper Tree by, you guessed it, the Brothers Grimm. The tale begins when a woman cuts her finger under a snowy juniper tree, bleeds onto the snow, and wishes for a child as red as blood and white as snow. She eats some juniper berries, gets pregnant, and gives birth to a perfect baby boy, and promptly dies of happiness. So, now I guess we know where all the biological mothers go in fairy tales, huh? Anyways, the boy's father buries her under the juniper tree and promptly remarries. He and his new wife have a daughter named Marlene. The stepmother adores her daughter, but absolutely hates the boy. And not in a go clean the fireplace Cinderella way. More like the luring him into a room with a chest of apples, waits until he leans in, then slams the lid and decapitates him, kind. She props the body in a chair, ties the head back on, and tells Marlene to ask her brother for an apple. When he doesn't answer, the girl boxes him in the face. and his head falls off. Now convinced she killed him, Marlene cries while her mother dismembers the body, cooks it into black pudding, and serves it to the boy's father. Jesus. That's messed up. And not only that, but the father found it extremely delicious, and he said, "Wife, this food is delicious. Give me some more." And he ate and ate, throwing all the bones under the table until he had finished it all. Okay, I think I need a break. Alright, I'm back, and we're almost done with this degeneracy. Marlene later gathers the bones and buries them under the juniper tree. Then a mist appears, and a beautiful bird rises from the tree. It visits the local townspeople and sings of its murder and collects 3 gifts: a gold chain, a pair of red shoes, and a millstone. The bird gives the chain to the father, the shoes to Marlene, and drops the millstone on the stepmother's head. Then the boy is reborn, and the 3 of them goes inside to eat lunch. The end. The Red Shoes. The Red Shoes is H.C. Andersen's fairy tale about disobedience and absolutely insane consequences. A poor girl named Karen is adopted by a rich old lady. She grows up spoiled and becomes obsessed with a pair of red shoes. She wears them everywhere, even to church, which, she's told several times, is highly improper. On her second trip to church in the red shoes, a mysterious old soldier sees her and says, "What beautiful shoes for dancing." Then he taps them and says, "Never come off when you dance." After her adoptive mother dies, Karen skips the funeral to attend a ball. The shoes take control, and she can't stop dancing. An angel appears and condemns her to dance even after death, as a warning to vain children everywhere. Karen begs for mercy, but the red shoes take her away before she hears the angel's reply. Karen finds an executioner and asks him to chop off her feet. He does so. However, the shoes continue to dance, even with Karen's amputated feet inside them. So the executioner gives her a pair of wooden feet and crutches. Then she tries to enter church, but the red shoes follow her around and block her from entering the church. She tries again the following Sunday. Same result. Eventually, Karen gives up, stays home, and prays to God for help. The angel returns and forgives her, and her little heart becomes so filled with peace, joy, and sunshine that it bursts. And her soul flies to heaven, where no one mentions the red shoes. The end. The Dead Mother. The Dead Mother is a retelling by W.R.S. Ralston of a Russian fairy tale. And it's just sad. A husband and wife live happily together. They're the envy of the village. Just the sight of them brings people joy. Then they have a child, and the wife dies shortly after giving birth. The husband is heartbroken. How is he supposed to raise the baby alone? He does his best and hires an old woman to care for the baby. During the day, the baby won't stop crying, it won't eat, and it won't sleep. But at night, silence. It's like the baby isn't even there. Suspicious, the old woman stays awake. At midnight, she hears the door open. Someone walks in and goes to the crib. The baby quiets, like it's being nursed. The next night, the same thing happens. And the next. So the townspeople hides in the room, wanting to see who nurses the baby. And at midnight, they see her, the dead mother, in the very same clothes she was buried in, kneeling by the cradle, quietly nursing the baby at her dead breast. When the light shines on her, she rises, stares at her child with deep sadness, and silently leaves. The townspeople stands frozen, and then they look at the crib and they found the babe was dead. The end. Bluebeard. Bluebeard is Perrault's darkest tale, and that's saying something. It begins with a wealthy nobleman whose only flaw is his terrifying blue beard, and the suspicious fact that all his previous wives mysteriously vanished. So, when he proposes to a beautiful young woman, she's reluctant, until he throws a week-long party for her and her friends, so lavish that suddenly the beard looked less blue. And the woman agreed to marry him. Soon after the wedding, Bluebeard gives her the keys to the entire castle, except for one forbidden room, which Bluebeard strictly forbids her to enter. I think you can guess where she went. She finds the key and unlocks the door, and finds a blood-soaked chamber full of his previous wives, all murdered and hung on hooks. And of course, she drops the key in the blood. And naturally, the key is enchanted and can't be cleaned. And of course, Bluebeard comes home early, and when he sees the bloody key, he says, "Well, madam, you shall enter it, and go take your place amongst the ladies you saw there." She throws herself to his feet and asks for time to pray. Bluebeard is a reasonable killer, so he gives her 15 minutes. And that is precisely enough time for her to call for her brothers from the window, who then burst into the castle and run him through with swords. Bluebeard had no heirs, so the wife inherited his entire estate. She uses it to marry off her sister, promote her brothers, and find a very normal, non-murdery husband. The end. The Shadow. Identity theft is not a joke. The Shadow, by H.C. Andersen, starts with a scholarly man who travels to a hot southern country. There, the sun is so intense it burns everything, including his shadow, which becomes thin, strange, and, eventually, sentient. One evening, he jokes that his shadow should sneak into the mysterious house across the street. To his surprise, it does. The next morning, he realizes that he no longer has a shadow, so he spends a couple of days growing a new one. Then, he goes home to write about things that are true, good, and beautiful. The years go by, and the man grows old and forgotten, because nobody wants to read about that stuff. Then, one day, there's a knock at his door. It's his shadow. But it's not a shadow anymore. It's a man. Rich and powerful, dressed like a gentleman. The shadow has seen and experienced the darkest corners of human nature, and it had thrived there. And as the man will soon learn, it now masters the dark arts of lies and manipulation. As soon as it opens the door, it immediately begins mocking the old man's current and pitiful shadow. Then, with a friendly smile, it invites him on a journey. "Old friend," it says, "I'll pay for everything." And slowly, on their journey, their roles begin to reverse. The shadow, now always in front, demands respect from its former master. The old man settles into his new role. But when the shadow decides to marry the princess, the man protests. The shadow may deceive him, but he can't stand silently and watch it deceive the kingdom. So he tries to reveal the truth. But the shadow claims to the authorities that it is the old man that is the shadow and has him arrested. The story ends with the shadow, now royalty, waving from a sunlit balcony, while the real man lies dead in the darkness, replaced by a soulless copy, a shadow. The end. Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel is another classic from the brothers Grimm. Starving children, parental abandonment, and cannibalism. A cute family story. Hansel and Gretel are the kids of a poor woodcutter. When famine hits, their stepmother decides there's not enough food to go around, so naturally, the children must go. She convinces their father to abandon them in the forest. Twice. The first time, Hansel leaves a trail of white pebbles to find their way home. The angry stepmother sends them away again, and this time she takes away the pebbles. So the second time, he uses breadcrumbs, but birds eat them, and now they're lost. After 3 days of wandering, they stumble across a house made of cake, sugar, and bread. And of course, they start eating it. Then, the door opens, and an old woman invites them inside, feeds them, gives them soft beds, and then locks Hansel in a cage. Because, surprise, she's a cannibal witch, and the house was built to lure hungry children. She locks Hansel in a cage to fatten him up, while Gretel is forced to work and fed only crab shells. But Hansel and Gretel decides to fight back. When the witch checks his finger to see if he's plump enough, Hansel holds out a bone, and the hag is too blind to notice. After 4 weeks of this, she gets impatient and decides to eat him anyway. And Gretel too. She fires up the oven and tells Gretel to check the heat. Gretel pretends not to understand, so the witch leans in to show her. That's when Gretel shoves her in, slams the door, and leaves her to burn to death. The kids loot her treasure and escape. A duck ferries them across a river, and they return home to their father. the stepmother conveniently died. And with the witch's gold, they all live happily ever after. The end. So, that was it. Let me know in the comments which fairy tale you think is the darkest and why. Click on my head to subscribe for more videos, or click on the next one. Thanks for watching. Cheers.